Next question.
Yeah, so it looks like Actively Disengaged asked, how does someone become one of the bloggers on the LTB network? This is a process that we're actually still figuring out. The blogging thing came about because I realized that an individual article on a blog is not really like a show, but a blog itself is actually quite like a show. It has continuity of branding. It has continuity of, essentially what I do with Let's Talk Bitcoin is I curate. I'm on maybe 50% of the content, but I introduce all of it. I provide the thread of continuity that goes through it all. So I view a blog as kind of the same way. Our new platform is essentially going to support the ability to create as many of these subsidiary blogs as we want, and turning them into a custom branded thing is just going to be as simple as putting together a skin for that particular character of that particular blog, and then spinning it out. So really, I don't know. We might have a contest. I haven't really gotten that far yet of how we're going to figure that out. It might be worth talking about another point.
How is this different from crypto stocks? Can you just sell shares?
Yes, we could sell shares, but I don't know if that's legal. And we're a California-based company, and I don't really want to tempt fate, because a lot of times, even if what you're doing is legal, if it's not well understood, that kind of can be the same thing.
If you purchase a piece of content using LTBcoin, do you get exclusivity? How will you check for this?
The exclusivity question is interesting. We're not actually asking for exclusivity on really anything. What we will be enforcing, though, is exclusivity within the network. So, for example, if a piece of content if an article is purchased for one blog, and the deal doesn't specify that it's not exclusive, because I assume that there's going to be, again, I don't want to make any hard and fast rules here, but I assume that most blogs are going to want exclusive content rather than not. So we'll be able to enforce within the network, okay, well, this piece of content was published here, so therefore it doesn't qualify for proof of publishing payments anywhere else on the network. I see there's another question there that says, if someone wants to become a content creator on the network, what should they be doing right now? That actually is a good question. You should be thinking about what types of content you want to create. So I mentioned this before. We have a rate card, basically, that is called proof of publishing, that talks about the various point allocations, basically, that each type of piece of content generates for the team that creates it. This is a system I'm calling autonomous content teams, basically as self-forming content teams anyways.
We want to make it as easy as possible for people to generate content within the network that's, I think, distributed also within the network, correct? And that's kind of where you're going with the autonomous content teams. I don't know, maybe you can discuss that basic idea, since people are kind of new to that term.
The long and the short of it is that I don't want to make any rules, or rather, I don't want to make any subjective rules. I want to make rules where we can say, okay, these are the broad standards to comply with. So like I said, you'll submit a 50-minute show, right? A 50-minute audio show, or a blog that publishes at least one article per week. Like, those will be the minimums in order to create this type of platform or sub-platform on top of our platform. From that, gosh, I keep getting lost in this explanation already, and I know that nobody else is going to follow it if I'm already getting lost. Let's move on to a different thing. We're figuring out what content creators need to do. The goal is to make it as easy as possible. Once the new website is done, and I think we're going to have a test version up by the end of the month, then it'll be much more clear, and we'll be able to start playing around with the new platform and seeing exactly how difficult it's going to be to do this.
I've got a question, Adam. So other than earning LTBcoin for content, let's say someone just wants to have their poems or their prose, their short stories on the LTB network because that's what they enjoy doing. And let's say that there is someone who's talented at that, and viewers, listeners start to really appreciate what the person's creating, just excellent poetry or haiku or whatever. Let's say that person is not, by putting those out there, earning LTBcoin, and let's say that for whatever reason, well, I guess my question is there incentive that at some point a blog would pick them up, or is it fair to say that some of their incentive is just having a platform to allow people in the Bitcoin community to hear, to listen to to be able to read their poems and read their short stories?
I think that there's definitely an advantage to having a centralized audience. This is something that I figured out fairly early on, is that it's always better to have a website that has 7 updates a week rather than a website that has 1 update a week. People don't make websites that have 1 update a week. a part of their schedule, and it's very, very difficult to become a part of people's lives. Really, I mean, that's what we've done in a lot of ways with Let's Talk Bitcoin. It's what a lot of these types of podcasts do, is they integrate themselves and become useful, and then that so there's that side of it. You said a couple of things. First off, we're not saying that I'm not saying in any way that poetry or songs or anything like that don't fit within what we're doing. I actually think they do, but I think that, again, like, there will be a blog that'll be like the, poetry blog, or, and you'll have a bunch of them, as many people as want to curate that. You'll have, a blog that's about songs or something like that, or a show that isn't really informational at all. It's, soundscapes and songs and things like that. So I think the creatively, there are a lot of options. The final point was, would a blogger accept this even if they're not earning it from LTB? And I think that is, the same could be said about Bitcoin. They're not earning Bitcoin from writing most of the time, or from, doing a song most of the time, but they accept tips in it. Is it because Bitcoin is so amazing? No, it's because Bitcoin is valuable. And so tips are money that you didn't have before. So it's always, that's a good thing. I view LTB as the same thing. I think that it will have a value, and the market will figure it out pretty quick. It might be a low value because there's going to be a lot of units at first, but that value just means that when people tip, they're going to feel that much more okay with tipping, 1,000 LTB because it's worth $1. People do that. We've seen this with Doge, and I think that's the lesson to learn.
Yeah. Nice. Thanks.
Okay. So next question.
Yeah, just because last night it was 2 a.m. for me, so I'm not sure if my memory is quite correct. But weren't we discussing about the possibility of having a kind of market for content where people can basically post ideas that they want to write about and or create shows about, and then the ACTs could pick from there? Adam? Matt?
Yes. Yeah. No. So there are a lot of expansions to this, and I'm trying not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but yeah, last night, one of the things that we talked about, I've been really obsessed with Reddit-like interfaces, with interfaces where you have the ability for communities to do sorting, essentially, and curating themselves by upvotes and downvotes. But the thing that I don't like about Reddit is that people just do it, basically. Because there's no cost associated with it, because there's no value associated with it, it becomes more of I'm expressing my opinion, as opposed to I'm, stating something that is important to me. And so people do it for reasons that aren't necessarily great, and you find a lot of content gets downvoted just because people don't even bother to look at it and just downvote stuff. There are a variety of reasons why just allowing random user accounts to vote on stuff and then have that impact sorting isn't always great. But what I think that we can do with something like LTBcoin, again, because it's not worth very much and people are okay to spend something that's not worth very much, it becomes kind of easy for us to, as like the first level of moderation, to have people post, either ideas or the actual piece of content before it gets published somewhere in that marketplace. And then people who are interested in the content, but not necessarily in the market to publish it on a blog, can say, yeah, this looks good. I would like to see this. I would like to see this posted somewhere. I'd like to see this get exposure. And so they vote it up. And then after that, maybe you get like 2 or 3 free vote ups, per day or something like that. But then after that, if you want to vote something up, then you tip it. You send 1 LTB to it, or you send however many LTB to it that you want. Those LTB get passed through to the person who created the content. And then people who are moderating these blogs or moderating these shows have the ability to just look at this list and say, oh, well, there's one that a whole bunch of people already liked. It hasn't been published, so it makes more sense for me to get that one because I know that the community is going to have a good response. But at the same time, because of that, the price might be higher. The price for that piece of content might be higher. And again, if we were talking about a market where you're trying to absolutely maximize your efficiency with what you're, and conserve as much as possible, this might not work, but I don't think that's the environment we're going into. I think that content creators are going to have a lot of surplus, and it's going to make more sense to have a better show that takes less work from your part and is higher quality overall, which adds more value to the network when you control some of the other coins, than it does to not spend any funds. I think that this is going to, again, like I think Paul Boyer, who's on the call for Mad Money Machine, he's probably going to keep a lot more just because he does the solo show. He does all his editing himself. He, doesn't really have interviewers or anything like that. So like that's totally him. But I think that there are a lot of other shows that are going to, spend 50% on content that comes from outside, just because, again, like if you do that, you could probably get some really good content. You could probably, you know, up the quality of your show without actually having to do more work yourself, which is quite valuable in my experience. I've been enjoying it.
So yeah, I think you have to kind of look at LTBcoin like right now as kind of an ongoing conversation that's in development, in the same way that I think Bitcoin was started. So I think, you know, kind of really grasping, taking in what the community wants from LTBcoin is really going to allow us to leverage a successful product.
Yes. So, Matt, I see that there's another question here that says, could you produce partial content, e.g. the basis for a blog post, but someone else might contribute value through editing, improving writing style, etc.? And yeah, I think that that's totally going to happen. I think that that's really what we're designing, and we're trying to create tools or connect tools that will let people form, you know, like if you want to, it's really interesting, you know, like I had a really interesting experience working with Charlie Shrem a couple of weeks ago on the Mt. Gox piece that we did. And that was something that came together in about 36 hours over a series of emails and then a couple of Skype calls and stuff like that. And, you know, it was a total collaboration, and we produced, I think, a really good piece. And there were about 4 or 5 people involved with the production of it. So I think that that is actually going to be much more common, because we're going to have a community of people who are looking to do stuff like that, who want to have that experience and who want to create value in a collaborative fashion. And we have all the tools to be able to do it. And this gives us essentially the liquidity to be able to say, rather than this being something that you're going to have to do speculatively for 6 months, just do it speculatively once. Then, you know, if you do it once, you get published, then you're in the allocation and you get a bunch of LTBcoin, which then gives you basically the ability to outsource your entire production to other people in the LTBcoin community if you wanted to. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's what I got.
Yeah, and I'm pulling these questions from YouTube, so yeah. I will do my best to kind of voice, I think, what their thoughts are. But yeah, I kind of envision, you know, the system working like, so you're attending a conference and maybe you have struck up a conversation with somebody who's making some waves in the industry and you want to record the content. So you record the content and then you submit that, you know, content to the network, and then they use that network and try to curate it to fit into shows or channels or however I think we approach this problem. So
yeah, I think that yeah.
we will see.
So I've got a question, Adam. As you know, Lidge and I have the show, and occasionally we wish that we had some better content. Pardon me. So do you envision this as something where, you know, we'll have our little stash of LTBcoin and we're looking for, you know, some extra content, so we'll be able to go to, let's say, a library of content that's there on LTB and grab from this library of, you know, a interview with somebody, or you know, a piece from some, you know, major newspaper or something that we can read. Will we be able to grab and buy, you know, in an easy
so the newspaper thing, what you could do, so with the what you could do is you can grab pieces of finished content, basically. If you want to grab pieces of unfinished content, I mean, it's your prerogative, but rather than like the newspaper thing, the only way I see that being something that you pay for in LTBcoin is if like I or somebody else were like, this is a good story and here's a recording of me reading it, you know, and it's edited, or, you know, and again, like I can see stuff like that, but if you just want to read something out of the newspaper, then by all means, just read it out of the newspaper. You don't have to pay anybody.
Right, but I guess what I'm getting at is, you know, will there be a kind of a library there for podcasters to choose from? So we want to grab.
Yes, but it's less a library. I think that there will be two things. I think there's going to be a market, and then things that don't get purchased on the market will go in the library. Is what I suspect will happen.
Okay,
but because we're doing this exclusivity thing, it means that there isn't really going to be a collective library where you'll be able to go back 6 months and. You know, like you might be able to do that for clips. Like I want to have a clip library. I've been talking about that for the last month or so, and I'd really like to have a library like of all the interviews that we've done and all the content, so that people can go back and grab clips from that, and then you can use it for clips. But for stuff that you would pay for, I view that as more for services and for original new content that has yet to be aired.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody just asked a great question to Mois. Are we limited to only Bitcoin cryptocurrency related content? So I think this is something that we've we've been addressing and tossing around in our brains which method is kind of the best avenue to pursue. Do we pick the specific Bitcoin only media market, or do we address other content providers issues? So maybe Adam can dive into this more.
I think that we're going to again, I don't know the answers to this yet. We're still figuring it out. But I think what's going to happen is that we're going to start off with cryptocurrency only content. And then I think that, again, because of the way that we have the blog structured, people will be able to spin off other blogs. And, content is just, it's just content. If there's a demand for it, if people want to run blogs on the LTB network in this fashion or want to run shows that don't conform with this and people want to advertise on them, that's actually fine by me. The conversation we've been having internally is whether to do this as LTBcoin or like a talk coin or something like that. That is something that's under consideration. I think that at this point we're pushing forward on LTBcoin because if we're going to make some mistakes early, it's probably better to make them with a smaller ecosystem and then take the lessons we learned here and expand it out into a larger project. But at the same time, with cryptocurrency, we're starting a 5-year project here. So it might make more sense just to start with the thing that we think we're going to switch to in 6 months anyways. Again, these are ongoing questions.
Actively had a great comment. If Andreas Antonopoulos charges for interviews, he's going to be the LTBcoin Bill Gates.
I had a good conversation with Andreas and Stephanie about this. I should mention that so far I am pioneering this project. This is the project that I'm pushing. I've briefed Stephanie and Andreas about it, and we've had conversations about it, and they're interested, but everybody has like a million projects. So I'm the guy who's pushing this forward, and they're excited about getting some of the back pay once we do the day one distribution.
Yeah, I think everybody's excited about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions in the Google Hangout?
Yeah, I do. Have you guys heard of Help a Reporter Out, Haro.com?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Do you anticipate doing something like that to kind of surface new content creators? I think that's an interesting solution. Yeah. Because and then on the flip side, you were mentioning, sticking with LTBcoin. I think that's a smart move for the initial launch. Prove your concept, and then I think this could scale because we see a lot of content producers on the mainstream side of things, like Chicago, sometimes elsewhere, are looking for solutions, especially with microtransaction relating to content consumption. So I could see this being something that could be basically licensed out to other content creators, platforms, etc.
Well, so licensing is an interesting word, and I'm actually curious for your thoughts on this, Scott. I'm not claiming any ownership to any of this stuff. Sure. I mean, like, we're putting out a protocol here. It's going to be open source. And, so, I kind of figure that my monetization from that side comes from consulting for companies like that. But I don't really see a licensing structure. I mean, right?
Well, you could take the Red Hat Linux approach, offer a dashboard, scale it that way, and basically enable any Chicago Sun-Times like, hey, here's 7 different means of analytics, distribution, etc. So
right. Cool. Yeah, that makes sense to me. We're not talking about most of the stuff that we're looking at doing, but I've been talking about this LTBcoin project privately with people for about 2 months, and I've had a really, really positive response. And so I think that we're going to start off with the sponsorships being the thing that you can do with it and the tipping and all that stuff. But what we're going to move towards is one where actually this is a really useful token that lets you do things that you can't do with Bitcoin in a whole variety of capacities. So I think that's where kind of the long-term value of this comes from. One thing, we are actively looking for developers at this point. So if you get involved now, you're going to be part of the LTBcoin initial distribution, which is, like I said, that 50% of the week 1 money supply that's going to be distributed. But I don't have bounties set up yet. I don't have a lot of specificity on the projects. We're looking for people to help us figure out where we need to expand and where we need to continue to define this thing. My task over the next week, while we get ready for the test launch, is to finish defining all of the rules. And you can actually find links to all of those documents as they are currently created at the LTBcoin.com forums under the it's in the LTBcoin talk section entitled Proof of Publishing. It's a set of 2 documents, and there will probably be a 3rd document. And you can also see the proposed distribution of coins in there. And like I said, it's a weekly distribution. It starts off at about 700,000 a week. And by the end of year 3, it's down to under 100,000 per month. So it's a pretty aggressive deflationary trend. But again, the goal here is to further emphasize and reward people who are here early. Because that really, when it comes to a network like this, when you're starting a podcast or starting a blog, getting that first 1,000 readers or listeners is the barrier. And then once you get past that, these things kind of start feeding themselves. So what we're doing here primarily is giving everybody the ability to bootstrap past that hard part point and just start with the part where you can just focus on content and not have to worry about any of the other stuff. So get involved now. It's a good time, and help us define, frankly, what the job should be. I am definitely going to be looking for a CFO. I'm definitely going to be looking for a CTO. There are a variety of other positions that are on the core organizational side. Probably we'll have a COO too. So if you want to get involved, now's a real good time.
And are there going to be any traveling troubadour positions?
So, so what I want to do with this is, because this is kind of like our store credit or our company credit, I want to provide a lot of these services. And as we pick up other sponsors, I think that it's a no-brainer for us to partner with Cheap Air and to try to get Cheap Air to accept LTBcoin, or at least to accept it from us internally, in exchange for travel. And, we'll do that, take that as a sponsorship and trade kind of thing. We can really have these kind of barter relationships where LTBcoin can become a useful thing in a variety of capacities. And in the meantime, while we're doing the bootstrapping, I'd like to have a travel agency basically set up that is built around Bitcoin, but that also is on board with LTBcoin and can take that, and even potentially give it a preferential rate. Because the interesting part is that, the reason why people are interested broadly in cryptocurrencies that aren't Bitcoin is because they have more deflationary potential than Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin is the oldest cryptocurrency, and so it's the furthest along in its life cycle. And because of that, it doesn't have as much of its deflationary potential as something that cost a couple of pennies. So there's definitely a profit motive that's involved here. And a lot of the vendors who I've spoken with have been very interested in that, just because if they're interested in Bitcoin, they're interested in deflationary currencies because they think it's going to make them money.
Yeah, nice.
Definitely. Maybe we could talk about some of the audience models that we're talking about, being able to actually generate coins by listening or participating in content in different ways.
These are, again, still up for debate, but there's going to be a percentage somewhere in the 25 to 35% range of these tokens that are given to the audience each week. So the basic model is this. You pick an incentivized action. So let's say it's commenting on the Let's Talk Bitcoin blogs. People who comment on blog posts are tracked on a per hour or per day basis or something like that. And, the number of comments logged. Comments that aren't spam and don't get marked as such essentially count for proof of commenting, which then takes a percentage of that percentage that's going to the audience. So it might be, say, 10% of the audience allocation for the week. And it's distributed to people who commented based on how many comments they made over that time period. So because you do this like every hour or every day, if you comment on a day when few people have commented besides you, then it's actually can be potentially very profitable for you, because you're competing. Essentially, it's like each instance is localized mining, except instead of there only being one winner, there is everybody's winner, and it's all proportional. So it's like everybody's in a localized mining pool almost. We've also talked about this for tipping, where like if you send a tip, to any person on the LTB network or any content on the LTB network, then it gets logged as you sent a tip, and then based on the value of that tip, it's compared against the value of all the other tips that everybody else sent during that same hour or day or whatever, and you split the LTB coins in that way. So tipping can be a profitable enterprise. Donating money to somebody can generate profit for you because if you do it at a time when nobody else is doing it, you might actually get back more than you put in. So there's a bunch of models like that I want to do. And the listening part is actually probably the hardest one, because it's difficult to tell if someone is actually listening to it or if they're just playing it and then walked away from their phone. We actually want people to listen. So, Matt, I know you've been talking about proof of education as a way to go down. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. I brought it up on the forum that basically we could establish a model that's either proof of education, proof of learning, that would basically quiz users consistently while they're listening to content. And maybe the question, it asks them for a multiple choice answer or a short explanation that is somehow verified by the community. It could be several different options, but what I think would really be great about this is we're actually encouraging users to learn more about Bitcoin, and they're actually earning a cryptocurrency that they can liquidate into Bitcoin if they want, or use for different purposes outside of computational mining. And I think learning and building more evangelists in Bitcoin is really what the community absolutely needs right now, especially with all the information going around about everything that went down with Mt. Gox to everything that's happened. So,
hey, can I ask you guys a side question? It's
Sure.
In reference to Cryptsy. So I've been using Cryptsy for a while, and I guess I trust them, but I don't really understand, how much or how little we should trust an exchange. So I think they're in Florida. Big Vern's the owner. I read an article about him. I don't remember his full name, but can you talk just for a second about that? Like, to what extent do you trust Cryptsy, or can we rely on Cryptsy to be here next year or the year after, not gox us, not pull a gox on us?
I think that Cryptsy is actually one of the more dangerous exchanges out there.
I hate to hear that.
Yeah, but I'm in the same boat. I use Cryptsy. There just aren't many good options because it just depends what type of risk you're talking about. Cryptsy is.
I don't think Cryptsy is necessarily dangerous. I think some of the coins that they operate within the network are dangerous.
Well, I'm talking about the U.S. I'm talking about operating that exchange in Florida. That's in my view, that's the most dangerous thing that they do.
Why?
Because we don't know what's going to happen, and banking relationships can change. And Cryptsy is sort of insulated from that because they're sort of insulated from that because they don't trade dollars. It's just, but they want to trade dollars. They're trying to go into that. So again, I don't know. I've been getting a itchy feeling about Cryptsy for the last couple of weeks. But again, it's just because of the environment that we're in, and I don't know.
We could essentially have fiat coins on the counterparty protocol, right? And you could exchange these fiat coins for LTB coins.
Trading the coins isn't the problem. Trading the coins is, and again, we don't need to use Cryptsy at all. We can just use the decentralized network. I'm not really viewing dollars as an onboarding mechanism for LTBcoin. I'm thinking that people are going to come in from other cryptocurrencies and specifically from Bitcoin. I think that's the vast majority of what we'll get.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that, frankly. I think that, this is already hard enough to understand. It's going to take a while before people get it. So I'd rather that we get people who are at least savvy enough to be able to get into Bitcoin rather than trying to explain to people who can't even do dollars.
Is there a safe decentralized exchange coming up? I know this is really off subject, but is there a safe decentralized exchange coming up that people will be able to rest easy having, 10 million Doge coins there or 200 Litecoins or what have you?
Well, the counterparty wallet that's coming out has a built-in decentralized exchange. So I don't know if it's going to be,
I know
safe
of at least one or two. Yep.
Yeah. There are several coming out. This is a problem that's been known since.
Yeah.
I think I started talking with Charles Hoskinson about putting together an X Prize for a decentralized exchange back in July of last year or something like that. So this has been a problem that's been really apparent. And Gox has always been, Gox just failed this time. That's the only difference. We went through this exact same learning curve last time, except they stuck around. And so people didn't, it didn't end. That was the only different thing that happened this time.
John, let me just chime in on the idea of a decentralized exchange. Basically, the way Counterparty works, if I traded with you over Counterparty, Counterparty never holds any of our coins. You see, it's a peer-to-peer exchange. Am I making myself clear?
Yes. Yes.
Because before you asked a decentralized exchange where you can trust having all your coins. No. On such an exchange, you have your coins always yourself with your own private keys. Sorry, I'm just confusing this a little bit.
No, you're not. You actually cleared it up for me quite a bit. Basically, you're still, instead of, as an exchange like Gox, you don't have a wallet on there that's yours. On Cryptsy, you don't have a wallet on there that's yours that you can control completely. They control, what you have, and you just have numbers up there on your computer screen that show how many Litecoins you have, for instance. But you're saying with a decentralized exchange, I actually just still hold whatever Litecoins, for instance, I have in my own wallet. And that makes a lot of sense to me, and that sounds like the way that it should be.
Yeah.
Yes,
exactly. It's what we've been waiting for. It's just been hard to do these things to this point.
Yeah. No, that helped a lot. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. So there are two questions from the chat. One is, can you make physical LTB coins? Yes, you can. And we're going to.
How about T-shirts?
There's more to it than that, but I don't want to give it away until I can absolutely make sure that we've got the partners on board to do it, but I'm pretty excited about it. Okay, so the other thing is talking about the proof of commenting and proof of tipping. And the question was, does this make comments on high traffic days less valuable? And the answer is yes, it does. It means that comments and tips are most valuable when few people are doing them, which actually I think is a good reflection of reality. So if you are, like if a piece of content or a day is particularly popular with regards to tipping, people should ultimately be tipping because they want to tip, because they think the content is good and because they're willing to, and because they think that it's a fair thing to do. The proof of tipping part, the compensation part, is a bootstrapping mechanism, but it's only needed when nobody's doing it. When everybody's doing it, it's just like a little passive income stream for participating. And I think that it's still going to be a decent, amount that's going to be distributed on a per day basis for all of these things, just because, again, we're using big enough numbers that we don't have to give people 0.1 of a coin. We can give people 10 coins or, a simple thing. And that's okay because we have a lot of them because they're not worth too much. But the goal is that they will eventually be. So yeah, everything, all of these mechanisms are designed to make it so that we never have a day or a week where there's nothing, where regardless of what the thing is, whether it's content or it's, and like that's the other thing is that by doing this, you convince people to spread things out, because otherwise, what if everybody just wants to release on Wednesday? Well, they can. There's no disadvantage. But if you have a system like this where it tracks it by the day or by the week or whatever, that it encourages people to release on a schedule that actually makes sense for humans, as opposed to make sense for maximizing your potential impact.
Nice.
Ruben says, what is the time window for accepting comments in the proof of comment protocol? We're still talking about it. I'd like it to be per day or per hour. I'm unclear on exactly how much of a pain I'm going to be inviting if I say per hour. But I think that that makes sense to me. Then you can cater to a completely international audience, or at least people who stay up all night, and you incentivize participation basically around the clock with a per hour thing. The end game of LTBcoin really is that we wind up with a whole bunch of 24-hour networks, and there are just so many different options you can choose from that you never have to listen to anything or never have to read anything that you don't think is going to be very high value to you, because you're picking curators, really, is what you're doing in this system. You're choosing which curators you most value the work of, and then getting everything that they do and being able to make decisions on the fly and be alerted when other people are doing something that's interesting that you might have turned off. But ultimately, it's about putting the choice into the hands of the individual who is making the content decision. Yeah.
Adam, we have Andreas wanting to get on the call. Can you send him a link to the Google
sure.
Hangout?
And there he is. Hey, Andreas.
So how is everyone? I've been listening to this discussion. It's very, very interesting. Great conversation. Great questions so far.
So actively disengaged has asked another question that I think is good. It says, if someone writes an amazing article and someone else wants to do an audio version of it, will that be allowed? Will the original writer get a portion of the audio's LTBcoin? There are two ways that this could happen. You could have it published, the text version of it, on somebody's blog. Somebody could select it for that. And then you could produce, or you could find someone to produce for you the audio version of it. And then you'd have to find somebody else to include it in a show. And so you could ostensibly be paid twice for work that's done once, but there would have to be someone who knows that it's already been released in these other channels and finds a lot of value from it. So again, like if it's such an amazing piece that a bunch of people want to run it, then yeah, I think that's true. But otherwise, I suspect actually what's going to happen is that audio versions are going to be viewed as value adds because they'll be able to be easily embedded into both our new website and our player. So people will have the ability essentially to consume it more than one way. So you're essentially just broadening your audience by adding an audio version. So it should, in theory, at least according to the theory I'm working off now, make whatever you're doing more valuable to have a video version or an audio version, frankly. It just depends on if you can convince other people that it's valuable and get them to pay you for it.
BitGive Foundation is a nonprofit charitable giving organization leveraging the power of the Bitcoin community to improve public health and the environment worldwide. Help us demonstrate the significant impact of Bitcoin in addressing these critical issues on a global scale. Support international giving in Bitcoin. Please visit our website at www.bitgivefoundation.org. That's www.bitgivefoundation.org.